This is something I had to learn the hard way, and I had to learn it while I was already carrying responsibility. There was a season in my life when I was doing everything a man is supposed to do. I was working, I was providing, and I was staying busy. But inside, I felt like I was behind. It is not because I was lazy, but it's because my life, it felt like it was being managed and not built. I remember sitting in my car one afternoon after work. The engine was off and I was just staring into a daze. And it's because I didn't want to walk into the house carrying that same pressure again. I had bills on my mind, I had this weight on my chest, and then I had this thought that kept repeating itself. And if I'm being honest, it was screaming. How am I working this hard and still not getting ahead? So if you're watching this and you have that same feeling and that same quiet panic, like you're late, I need you to hear me. You're not late. You're not behind. And you're not running out of time. You're just at a crossroads, because there's a difference between being behind and being unconscious. Most men, they never wake up to their life. They just react to it. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly the shift and the framework that helped me stop trying to catch up. And it actually started helping me build forward on purpose. Here's the fear that most men won't say out loud. It's not failure. It's waking up one day, maybe 30, maybe 42, maybe 55, and realizing I worked hard, but I didn't build a life I respect. And let me tell you how that fear shows up in real life. It shows up when you're scrolling and you see people your age and they're winning. And you feel that heat in your chest like, man, what am I doing wrong? It shows up when your kids ask you for something small and you got to do mental math in your head before you answer. And honestly, you hate that feeling because you want to be the man and the father who says yes. And you want to be able to say yes with peace. It shows up when you lay down at night and you're exhausted, but you can't sleep because your mind, it's running numbers and it's replaying time. That fear, it turns into pressure. Pressure then turns into rushing. And rushing is what keeps men stuck, because rush decisions are usually emotional decisions. So this video, it's not about catching up. It's about building correctly so that the next 10 years don't look like the last 10. And I'm not speaking from theory. I'm speaking as a man who had to rebuild his confidence, who had to rebuild his finances, and who had to learn how to lead himself again. I had to do it one decision at a time. I want to earn your trust here, so I'm going to try to slow down as much as possible. There was a point in my life when I was doing what society told me was basically right. I always felt like I was doing everything perfect. I was working, I was providing, I was handling all the responsibility. My wife, at the time, she was in college, so I handled everything. But internally, I felt disconnected from my own life. Money stress, it dictated my moods. Bills, they dictated my decisions. Fatigue, it dictated my patience. And here's the dangerous part about this all. From the outside, everything honestly looked fine. That's the pattern that most men, they never exit. You don't feel bad enough to change, but you don't feel good enough to be proud. That limbo is survival mode. And survival mode doesn't respond to motivation. It responds to clarity and structure. And I want to be honest with you. That feeling, it didn't mean that something was wrong with me. It meant that something was finally becoming more clear. Looking back now, that season, it wasn't the start of my decline. It was the moment I stopped running on autopilot. I didn't change because I was panicked. I changed because I became more aware. And awareness is where real rebuilding actually begins. Here's some truth that changed everything for me. You're not starting late. You're starting aware. Awareness, It's not a delay, it's an upgrade. Most men, they honestly build their lives unconsciously. They inherit beliefs about money. They inherit coping mechanisms. They inherit definitions of success that they honestly never chose for themselves. Intentional just means that you've stepped out of autopilot. And here's why that matters. An unintentional man can work for 30 years and still feel lost. A conscious man can rebuild his entire life in 5 to 10 years. Because consciousness, it collapses time. And here's the part most men miss after they become more aware. Awareness by itself doesn't change your life. It just hands you the responsibility to choose differently now. Because once you see the patterns, once you recognize the beliefs you inherited, you can't unsee them. And from that point on, either every decision, it's either reinforced and it reinforces the old version of you, or it starts building a new one. That's why awareness alone, it isn't enough. It has to be followed by an identity shift or an identity decision. So if I go deeper, I need you to understand you can't build a life you're proud of without first deciding who you're becoming. Most men, they try to change habits without changing identity. And I can tell you that never lasts. It will not last. Your nervous system, your habits, your discipline, they all obey your identity. If you still see yourself as behind, if you still see yourself as bad with money, just trying to survive, just making it, you're subconsciously sabotaging progress to stay consistent with that current identity. So the real question isn't, what should I do next? It's, what kind of man am I becoming in this season? I need you to write that down because everything else, it flows from it. Once you start asking that question, who am I becoming? Most men, they make a critical mistake. They try to change everything at one time. New habits, new goals, new routines, new standards. And instead of feeling empowered, what happens? They end up feeling crushed. And it's not because they're weak, but it's because they are unfocused, which brings up the next trap that keeps good men stuck. There's something most productivity advice gets wrong. Men, they don't burn out from effort. They don't at all. They burn out from diffusion. Too many goals, too many fixes, too many self-improvement projects that they're trying to do at once. When everything's important, nothing moves. Depth, it requires constraint. Pick one domain at a time, whether it's financial stability, whether it's emotional regulation, whether it's physical health, whether it's leadership at home. Progress compounds when focus narrows. This is how men regain confidence, not through massive wins, but consistent alignment. Focus alone won't save you because even when men simplify, they still rely on willpower to carry the weight. And willpower is unreliable, especially when you're tired, when you're stressed, or when you're under pressure. That's why most men, they don't fail from lack of desire. They fail from a lack of design, which to me is why my next shift or the next shift changes everything. All right, I want to get real practical with you. If your life requires constant willpower, it's poorly designed, and don't be upset for me saying that. Discipline is not a personality trait, it's an environment. High integrity men don't try harder. They don't. They remove friction. Some examples of removing that would be automated savings. Automate your savings so decisions, they disappear. Do weekly planning so your chaos doesn't creep in. Fix routines so your emotions don't drive behaviors. Systems, they free your mind so that you can lead instead of reacting. This is how stability is built. Let me be clear with you about something. I didn't become almost debt-free because I suddenly made more money or I got smarter. For a long time, I was surviving, and I was doing it and I was doing it better than I was before, but I was still reacting. I was paying bills late. I was using credit to breathe. I was hoping the next raise that it would fix all the pressure. What actually changed my finances wasn't income first. It was structure. I stopped making emotional decisions with my money. I gave every dollar an assignment. I automated what I could so discipline didn't depend on my mood. And once my finances stabilized, something unexpected, it basically happened. My confidence had changed. The way I showed up to work, it changed. The way I spoke, it changed. Promotions, they didn't come because I chased them. They came because I was operating with clarity and consistency, and I was doing that instead of operating with stress. And honestly, that's why I'm so big on systems. Not because they're sexy. Systems aren't sexy, honestly, but they quietly turn chaos into stability. And here's something I didn't understand until after the systems were in place. Structure, it didn't just change my finances, it changed my energy. I wasn't constantly drained anymore. I wasn't living in reactive mode or reaction mode. And that's when I realized something most men learn too late. Something that most men don't realize until it costs them years of their life is your energy that you have, it determines your future. It determines your future more than your intelligence does. What drains you, who drains you, what patterns leave you exhausted. Protecting your energy, it isn't selfish. It's honestly responsible. Because a depleted man, I can tell you this, a depleted man cannot lead. He can only endure. A proud life is built by a man who guards his time, his emotional bandwidth, his focus. And once you understand your energy, you start to see life, you start to see it honestly differently. You realize that most exhaustions isn't accidental, that they're chosen. They're chosen through habits. They're chosen through avoidance. They're chosen through comfort. And at that point, every decision becomes a vote. Every decision you make votes for one or two things. It votes for comfort and comfort now, or pride later. Comfort, what that does is it avoids tension. Pride earns self-respect. And self-respect, it changes how you live. Pride, it's what lets you look your children in the eyes. Pride is what lets you sit alone in silence without regret. To me, pride, that's the metric. Not applause, not comparison, integrity. I didn't feel proud the day that everything got easier. I felt proud the first time I did the hard thing, even when no one would have known if I did it or didn't. That's when something changed internally for me. Not my circumstances, but my relationship with myself. And here's the moment that everything shifts. When your actions, they start matching your values consistently, that's when anxiety, it actually drops. That's when confidence returns. That's when direction becomes clear. Not overnight, but permanently. Because you trust yourself again. And when you really look at it, everything we talked about, it comes back to the one alignment. You're not late, man. You're aware. Decide who you're becoming today. Simplify your focus. Install systems. Protect your energy. Choose long-term pride. That's how men rebuild their lives. And that's how they do it deliberately. You weren't designed to live in survival mode, I can tell you that. I can promise you that. You were built to lead. First yourself, then your family. And it's not about fixing you. It's about remembering who you are. Your life, it's not over. Your life is finally beginning with intention. Later.